The hospital room pulsed with desperate energy. 20 doctors had examined the 10-year-old girl in the bed, and 20 doctors had failed. Sophie Bennett lay pale against white sheets, her small body trembling with pain she couldn't name. Her father, Christopher Bennett, stood by the window, his expensive suit wrinkled from 3 days of wearing it, his face aged by fear. Every machine in the room beeped and hummed, monitoring a child whose crisis no one could solve. Sophie's hands moved frantically, her fingers forming shapes in the air, but everyone thought it was just panic. Just a scared little girl thrashing in confusion. Her mute lips tried to form words that would never come, her eyes streaming with tears that spoke of agony no one could interpret. The attending physician had just told Christopher they were running out of options. They had tested everything, scanned everything, tried every treatment protocol. But Sophie kept getting worse. Her fever climbed. Her pain intensified. And no one, not a single person in that room full of medical degrees and years of experience, could figure out why. Christopher watched his daughter suffer, watched her try desperately to tell them something, and felt more powerless than he'd ever felt in his life. All his money, all his connections, all his resources meant nothing when he couldn't save his only child. The head of pediatrics had just suggested they prepare for the worst. Christopher had thrown the man out of the room. He refused to give up. But as he watched Sophie's small hands flutter and shake, trying so hard to communicate something vital, something that could save her life, he felt hope slipping away like water through his fingers. If you were in Christopher's place, watching your child suffer while no one listened, what would you do? Subscribe to hear how one person's unique gift changed everything, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Christopher Bennett had built an empire from nothing. At 42, he'd made his first million by 30, his first billion by 38. He'd negotiated with world leaders, closed impossible deals, and never once felt truly helpless. Until now. The private hospital room on the 10th floor of St. Catherine's Medical Center held the most advanced equipment money could buy. Christopher had insisted on it. He demanded the best doctors, the top specialists, anyone who might save his daughter. They'd all come. And they'd all failed. Sophie lay in the adjustable bed, her brown curls damp with sweat, her skin too pale. At 10 years old, she should have been in school, giggling with friends, learning to paint like she loved to do. Instead, she'd been in this room for 4 days, getting worse by the hour. Christopher moved from the window to her bedside. He took her small hand carefully, mindful of the 4-line taped to her skin. Her fingers curled around his weakly. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here." Sophie's eyes opened, dark brown like her late mother's. Christopher's chest tightened. His wife had died when Sophie was only 3. A car accident, sudden and cruel. He'd raised Sophie alone for 7 years and she'd become his entire world. Now he was losing her too. Dr. Patterson, the head of pediatrics, entered the room with 3 other physicians. Christopher recognized Dr. Hughes, the neurologist, Dr. Kim, the infectious disease specialist, and Dr. Anderson, the surgeon who'd already performed one exploratory procedure that revealed nothing. "Mr. Bennett," Dr. Patterson began, his tone careful. "We've completed another round of tests. The blood work shows increased inflammatory markers, but we still can't locate the source of infection. The imaging shows nothing conclusive." "Then do more tests," Christopher said flatly. "Different tests. I don't care what it costs. Sir, we've done every test available. Multiple times. We're treating her symptoms but without knowing the underlying cause." Dr. Patterson trailed off. Sophie's hand suddenly gripped Christopher's harder. Her other hand moved, fingers forming shapes, movements frantic and purposeful. Her mouth opened in a silent cry of pain. "She's trying to tell us something," Christopher said urgently. "Can't you see that? She's trying to communicate." Dr. Hughes shook his head gently. "Mr. Bennett, Sophie's movements are likely involuntary responses to pain and fever. Children in distress often." "My daughter is not random," Christopher snapped. "She's brilliant. She's trying to tell us something." But the doctors exchanged glances that said they'd heard this before. Parents seeing patterns where none existed. Desperate minds finding meaning in chaos. After they left, Christopher sank into the chair beside Sophie's bed. He watched her hands continue their movements, slower now, tired but persistent. What was she trying to say? Why couldn't he understand his own daughter? His phone buzzed. His assistant, Margaret, had been handling everything at the office, keeping his schedule clear, managing the board members who wanted answers about his absence. He ignored the call. Work meant nothing right now. A nurse came in to check Sophie's vitals. She was kind, efficient, but like everyone else she didn't really see Sophie. She saw a patient, a case, a medical mystery. She didn't see the little girl who loved strawberry ice cream, who painted pictures of flowers, who'd learned to read before kindergarten despite never being able to speak. Sophie had been born mute. The doctors said it was a rare condition, possibly neurological, but she was otherwise healthy. Christopher had gotten her the best speech therapists, but Sophie couldn't produce sounds. Instead, she'd learned to write early. She communicated through notes, through her tablet, through gestures. Christopher had learned to read like a private language between them. But here, sick and weak, Sophie couldn't hold a pen steady enough to write. Her tablet had slipped from her fingers twice, the screen too difficult to focus on. And her gestures, the movements Christopher thought he understood, had changed. They'd become something else. Something he couldn't interpret. "Please, Sophie," he whispered, holding her hand to his chest. "Please hold on. We'll figure this out. I promise." But Sophie's eyes closed again, exhausted from pain and the effort of trying to be understood. Her hands finally stilled. Christopher looked at the clock. 3 a.m. Another night of watching, waiting, hoping for a breakthrough that never came. Outside the room at the nurse's station, the night shift supervisor reviewed the patient charts. St. Catherine's was short-staffed as always. The night nurse assigned to Sophie's floor had called in sick, and they'd had to call in someone from the registry. Someone new. The supervisor sighed. New nurses were always a gamble, especially on complex cases like Sophie Bennett. The girl's father was demanding, understandably so, but difficult to work with. He questioned everything, challenged every decision. The last nurse had quit after 2 days of his intense scrutiny. The elevator doors opened and a woman stepped out. She wore navy blue scrubs that brought out the warm brown of her skin. Her black hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried a coffee in one hand, her nursing bag in the other. She walked with purpose but without hurry, her movements confident. "You must be Tamara Johnson," the supervisor said, checking her roster. "That's me," the woman replied with a tired smile. "Sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was worse than expected." "You're fine. I'm Helen Martinez, night supervisor. I'll give you the quick rundown." Helen pulled up Sophie Bennett's chart on the computer. 10-year-old female, admitted 4 days ago with fever, abdominal pain, and altered mental status. She's mute, has been since birth. Father is very involved, very protective. 20 specialists have examined her, no definitive diagnosis yet. We're providing supportive care and monitoring. Tamara studied the chart carefully, her dark eyes scanning the notes. "What about communication? How does she normally communicate?" Helen looked up, surprised by the question. "She writes mostly. Uses a tablet. But she's been too sick to manage either." "Has anyone tried other methods?" Tamara asked. "Like what? Sign language, picture boards, anything else?" Helen shrugged. "I don't think so. The focus has been on finding the medical cause." "Why?" Tamara set down her coffee. "I'm just thinking about how scared she must be. Not being able to tell anyone what she's feeling, what hurts. That's terrifying for any child, but especially one who already has communication barriers." Helen's expression softened. "You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. But honestly, we're all so focused on keeping her alive that..." She trailed off. "Anyway, you'll be on this floor tonight. Sophie's in room 1015. Her father rarely leaves her side, so be prepared for questions. Lots of questions." "Understood," Tamara said. She picked up her coffee and headed down the hall. Room 1015 was at the end, the largest private room on the floor. As she approached, she could see through the glass door. A tall man stood by the window, his back to the door, his shoulders tight with tension. In the bed, a small figure lay motionless. Tamara knocked softly before entering. "Good evening, Mr. Bennett. I'm Tamara Johnson, your night nurse." Christopher turned. His face was haggard, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Where's the other nurse? The one from yesterday? I believe she's off tonight. I'll be taking care of Sophie." Tamara moved to the computer terminal to review the most recent vital signs. "How's she doing this evening?" "The same," Christopher said, his voice tight. "No better. No worse. Which means she's dying slowly while everyone stands around doing nothing." Tamara heard the pain under the anger. She'd heard it before many times in many hospital rooms. It was the sound of a parent watching their child suffer. "I understand you're frustrated," she said calmly. "I would be too. Do you have children?" Christopher asked. "No, sir. But I have a younger brother. He's 17 now, but when he was born we found out he was deaf. I spent his whole childhood watching people not understand him, watching him struggle to be heard in a world that wasn't built for him. I know what it feels like to watch someone you love be invisible to everyone else. Christopher's expression shifted slightly. Your brother is deaf? Yes. I learned American Sign Language when he was 2. It changed everything for our family. Tamara moved to Sophie's bedside, checking the 4-line, adjusting the blanket. Sophie stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. Then Tamara saw it. Sophie's right hand, resting on top of the blanket, moved. Just slightly. The fingers formed a shape, held it for a moment, then relaxed. Then another shape. Then another. Tamara froze, staring at the small hand. She does that constantly, Christopher said. The doctors say it's involuntary. Muscle spasms or pain responses. But Tamara was already moving, stepping closer, watching Sophie's hand intently. The shape formed again. Tamara's breath caught. Mr. Bennett, she said carefully, has anyone checked to see if Sophie knows sign language? Christopher stared at the nurse, his exhausted mind struggling to process the question. Sign language? Sophie's mute, not deaf. I understand that, Tamara said, still watching Sophie's hand. But many mute children learn sign language as a way to communicate. It's faster than writing, more natural than typing. Did she ever have speech therapy or communication therapy? Yes, of course. The best therapists in the state. They taught her to write, to use her tablet. Christopher's words slowed. Wait, there was one therapist about 3 years ago. She mentioned teaching Sophie signs. But Sophie was already writing so well, and she preferred her tablet. We didn't pursue it. But what if Sophie pursued it on her own? Tamara moved closer to the bed. What if she learned it somewhere else? At school maybe? Christopher's mind raced back through the years. Sophie attended Preston Academy, a private school with excellent special education resources. They had several deaf students. He'd seen Sophie interacting with them, had assumed she was just being friendly, inclusive. But what if? I never asked, he whispered. I never thought to ask if she'd learned to sign. Sophie's hand moved again, the same sequence of shapes. Tamara recognized one of them clearly now. It was the sign for help. But there was something else, another sign she was repeating. Something more specific. Sophie, Tamara said gently, leaning close to the bed. Sophie, can you hear me? Sophie's eyes opened, glassy with fever but aware. Tamara lifted her hands where Sophie could see them. Slowly, deliberately she signed, My name is Tamara. I know sign language. Can you understand me? Christopher watched, his heart pounding as Sophie's eyes widened. Her lips trembled. Then, with visible effort, her right hand lifted slightly. She formed a shaky sign. Yes. The word hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Christopher's knees nearly buckled. Tamara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. I'm here to help you, Sophie. Can you tell me where it hurts? Sophie's hand moved, signing slowly, carefully. Tamara watched intently, translating each sign. Lower, Sophie signed. Right side. Sure. Getting worse. Tamara's professional instinct kicked in. How long has it been sharp? Sophie struggled to form the numbers. 2 days. Maybe 3. Does it hurt more when you move? Yes. Much more. When you breathe deep? Sophie nodded, then signed, Sometimes can't breathe good. Tamara straightened immediately. She looked at Christopher. Mr. Bennett, I need to get a doctor in here right now. I think Sophie has been trying to tell everyone she has appendicitis, but the pain has migrated. It might have already ruptured. Christopher felt the room spin. Appendicitis? But they checked for that. They said. Where did they check? Tamara was already moving to the door, pressing the call button. Sophie just told me the pain is lower right side and has been getting progressively worse over days. That's textbook appendicitis progression. If it's ruptured, that would explain the fever, the infection markers, everything. A resident appeared at the door within seconds. What's the emergency? I need the attending surgeon here now, Tamara said firmly. This patient has been trying to communicate that she has severe lower right abdominal pain, pain on movement, and difficulty breathing. I believe we're looking at a ruptured appendix with possible peritonitis. The resident looked skeptical. The patient is mute. How did you? She speaks sign language, Tamara interrupted. I asked her where it hurt and she told me. Now please get Dr. Anderson up here immediately. The resident ran. Christopher moved to Sophie's other side, taking her free hand. Is that true, sweetheart? Is that where it hurts? Sophie signed again, this time to her father. Tried to tell them. No one understood. Tears streamed down Christopher's face. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't understand. Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff. Dr. Anderson arrived, still in his running clothes, called back to the hospital. Tamara quickly explained what Sophie had communicated. Lower right quadrant pain, sharp, worse with movement and deep breathing, progressive over 2 to 3 days, she reported. Patient has been communicating via sign language. Dr. Anderson immediately moved to Sophie's bedside. Sophie, I'm going to touch your belly gently. Can you sign to this nurse when it hurts the most? Sophie nodded weakly. The surgeon's examination took less than 2 minutes. When he pressed on Sophie's lower right abdomen, she signed sharply, her face contorting. Rebound tenderness, Dr. Anderson said grimly. Guarding. How did we miss this? We were examining the wrong areas, Dr. Hughes said, entering the room. Her initial pain presentation was different. It must have started higher and migrated down. That's exactly what appendicitis does, Dr. Anderson said. He turned to Christopher. Mr. Bennett, your daughter needs emergency surgery. Her appendix has likely ruptured. We need to operate now to clean out the infection and remove what's left of the appendix. Every minute we wait increases the risk. Christopher felt the world tilt, but for the first time in days he felt something else too. Oh, do it, he said. Whatever she needs. Dr. Anderson nodded and immediately began giving orders. The room became organized chaos as nurses prepared Sophie for transport. An anesthesiologist appeared. Consent forms materialized. Everything moved with urgent purpose. Sophie's hand found Tamara's. She signed something, her movements weak but clear. She's saying thank you, Tamara translated, her voice thick. She's saying you're the first person who heard her. Christopher looked at this nurse, this stranger who'd walked into his daughter's room less than 30 minutes ago and seen what no one else had seen. Who'd bothered to wonder how a child was feeling instead of just what was wrong with her body. Don't thank me yet, Tamara said to Sophie, signing as she spoke. You've got to be brave for a little while longer, okay? The doctors are going to fix what's hurting you. And when you wake up, I'll be right here. I promise. Sophie signed something else. Tamara smiled. She wants to know if you'll teach her more signs when she's better, Tamara told Christopher. Every sign there is, Christopher promised, gripping Sophie's hand. We'll learn together. They wheeled Sophie out of the room, a team of medical professionals now moving with clear direction and purpose. Christopher followed them to the elevator, but hospital policy stopped him at the surgical floor doors. We'll keep you updated every step of the way, Mr. Bennett, Dr. Anderson promised. This is a serious surgery, but we caught it in time. Thanks to your nurse. The doors closed. Christopher stood alone in the hallway, his legs finally giving out. He slid down the wall to sit on the floor, his head in his hands. Tamara found him there 20 minutes later. She'd completed her charting and knew she should check on her other patients, but something drew her back. She sat down beside him, not speaking, just being present. I almost lost her, Christopher said finally. Because I didn't understand. Because no one understood. But someone did, Tamara said gently. When it mattered most, someone understood. That's what counts. You saved her life. Sophie saved her own life. She never stopped trying to tell everyone what was wrong. She's incredibly strong. Christopher turned to look at this nurse with tired eyes and a gentle voice. Where did you come from? Tamara smiled slightly. Newark. About an hour's drive in good traffic. Despite everything, Christopher almost laughed. I meant, how did you end up here tonight? How did you? Right place, right time, Tamara said. And a little brother who taught me to see what other people miss. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Christopher said, when this is over, when Sophie's okay, I'm going to make sure you're compensated for what you did tonight. I'm going to. Mr. Bennett, Tamara interrupted gently, I was just doing my job. Making sure patients are heard is what nurses do. It's what nurses should do, Christopher corrected. But you're the only one who did. Tamara didn't argue. She'd learned a long time ago that some people needed to express gratitude to cope with fear. Christopher Bennett was one of those people. And honestly, given her student loan debt and her mother's medical bills, she wouldn't refuse help if he offered it. Pride didn't pay rent. Her phone buzzed. She checked it and saw a message from her brother, Terrence. How's the new job? You alive? She typed back. Interesting first night. Tell you later. Love you. Your brother? Christopher asked, noticing the smile on her face. Yeah. He worries about me. I'm all he has. What about your parents? Tamara's smile faded. My dad left when Terrence was born. Said he couldn't handle raising a deaf kid. My mom did her best with both of us, but she got sick 3 years ago. Cancer. She beat it, but the treatment wrecked her body. She can't work anymore. So I take care of both of them. Christopher heard the weight in those words. That's a lot of responsibility. It's what family does, Tamara said simply. You take care of the people you love no matter what. She stood up, smoothing her scrubs. I should check on my other patients. But I'll come back in a few hours when there's news about Sophie. Try to rest, Mr. Bennett. She's going to need you strong when she wakes up. Christopher watched her walk away, this nurse who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. He didn't know it yet, but Tamara Johnson was about to change his life in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. In the operating room, Dr. Anderson worked carefully. Sophie's appendix had indeed ruptured, and the infection had spread. But they'd caught it before sepsis set in. Another day, maybe even another 12 hours, and they would have lost her. As he cleaned the infected tissue and prepared to close, Dr. Anderson thought about the mute girl who'd been trying to communicate for days. And the night nurse who'd bothered to ask how a child was feeling instead of just what her test results showed. Sometimes medicine wasn't about fancy equipment or expensive procedures. Sometimes it was about paying attention. About listening even to someone who couldn't speak. Sophie Bennett would live. And all because someone had finally heard her silence. The surgery took 4 hours. Christopher spent every minute in the surgical waiting room, pacing, praying, bargaining with God the way desperate parents do. If Sophie lived, he'd be a better father. He'd pay more attention. He'd learn every way she communicated, never again assume he understood when he didn't. Tamara checked on him twice, bringing him coffee and a sandwich he didn't eat. She didn't say much, just sat with him for a few minutes each time, her presence somehow calming in the chaos of his fear. When Dr. Anderson finally appeared in the doorway, still in his surgical scrubs, Christopher's heart stopped. She's going to be okay, the surgeon said immediately, and Christopher's legs buckled. Tamara caught his arm, steadying him. The appendix had ruptured as we suspected, Dr. Anderson continued. There was significant infection in the abdominal cavity. We cleaned everything out, removed what was left of the appendix, and started her on strong antibiotics. She'll need to stay in the hospital for at least a week, maybe longer, to make sure the infection clears. But Mr. Bennett, your daughter is strong. She's going to recover fully. Christopher couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. You can see her in about 30 minutes, once she's settled in recovery, Dr. Anderson said. She'll be sedated for a few more hours, but after that, she should wake up gradually. After the surgeon left, Christopher turned to Tamara. You saved her. If you hadn't asked about sign language, if you hadn't thought to communicate with her differently, then someone else would have eventually, Tamara said, though they both knew that wasn't true. I'm just glad I was there when she needed someone. Christopher shook his head. No. You're the only one who saw her, really saw her. 20 doctors looked at her as a medical puzzle to solve. You looked at her as a scared child who needed to be heard. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I meant what I said earlier. I'm going to compensate you for this. I'm going to. Mr. Bennett, Tamara started, but he held up his hand. Please let me finish. You don't understand. I've spent the last 4 days throwing money at this problem. I hired the best doctors, the top specialists, paid for every test and scan and treatment. Millions of dollars, and none of it mattered. None of it helped Sophie. You walked in here with nothing but compassion and attention, and you saved her life. That's worth more than anything I could pay. But I'm going to try anyway. Tamara looked at this man, disheveled and emotional, clearly someone used to fixing problems with money. She understood the instinct. She also understood that sometimes people needed to give as much as others needed to receive. Okay, she said simply. If you want to help me, I won't refuse. I have student loans from nursing school. I have my mother's medical bills. I'm supporting my brother through his last year of high school. I work 2 jobs and still barely make ends meet. So yes, Mr. Bennett, if you want to help, I could use it. And I'll accept it with gratitude. Christopher was surprised by her directness. Most people would have protested, insisted it wasn't necessary, performed some elaborate dance of refusal before accepting. Tamara just told him the truth. What's your student loan total? He asked. $87,000, Tamara said without hesitation. And your mother's medical debt? About $40,000. She has insurance, but the cancer treatment had high copays and deductibles. And your brother, you said he's finishing high school? Yes. He wants to go to Gallaudet University. It's a university for the deaf in Washington. He's brilliant, Mr. Bennett. Top of his class. But it's expensive, and even with scholarships. She trailed off. Christopher pulled out his phone. What's your full name? And your bank account information? Tamara blinked. Right now. Right now. My daughter is alive because of you. I'm not waiting another second to help you the way you helped us. 20 minutes later, Tamara's phone pinged with a notification. She looked at it and nearly dropped her coffee. A deposit had just appeared in her account. $150,000. Mr. Bennett, she breathed, this is too much. My loans and my mother's bills don't add up to. The extra is for your brother's education, Christopher said. And for you. For rent, for bills, for whatever you need so you can stop working 2 jobs and maybe sleep occasionally. Tamara stared at the number on her screen. It was more money than she'd ever seen in her life. Her hand shook. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it. Say you'll let me help you the way you helped Sophie. Tamara looked up at him, this millionaire who just casually transferred enough money to change her entire life. She could pay off her loans. Pay off her mother's bills. Send Terrence to any college he wanted. Maybe even go back to school herself, get her nurse practitioner license. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you so much. Christopher nodded. You can see Sophie when she wakes up, right? You'll be here? Tamara checked her watch. Her shift technically ended at 7 in the morning, 2 hours from now. She had a second job at a clinic in the afternoon. Except she realized she didn't need that second job anymore. I'll be here, she promised. The nurse from recovery appeared in the waiting room doorway. Mr. Bennett? You can see your daughter now. Christopher followed her down the hall to a small recovery room. Sophie lay in the bed, pale and still but breathing steadily. Various monitors beeped softly. And 4 drip-fed antibiotics and fluids into her arm. She looked so small, so fragile. Christopher pulled a chair close and took her hand carefully. I'm here, sweetheart. Daddy's here. You're going to be okay. The doctors fixed what was wrong. And I'm so sorry I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me. But we're going to fix that too. We're going to learn sign language together, okay? Every single sign. Sophie didn't respond, still deep in medicated sleep. But Christopher thought maybe her fingers tightened slightly around his. He sat there for the next 3 hours, watching her breathe, thanking God and fate and whatever had brought Tamara Johnson to that hospital floor at exactly the right moment. When his assistant Margaret called, he finally answered. Sophie's okay, he said before she could ask. Surgery went well. She's recovering. Margaret's relief was audible. Oh, thank God. Mr. Bennett, the whole office has been so worried. What do you need? How can we help? I need you to find the best sign language instructors in the state. I need private lessons scheduled, starting as soon as Sophie's strong enough. For both of us. And I want you to look into making a significant donation to programs that support deaf and mute children. Education, communication therapy, whatever they need. Of course, Margaret said. I'll start making calls right away. And sir? I'm so glad Sophie's going to be okay. Me too, Christopher whispered. At 7 in the morning, Tamara's shift officially ended. But instead of going home, she made her way back to Sophie's recovery room. She found Christopher exactly where she'd left him, holding his daughter's hand, looking exhausted but relieved. Any change? She asked softly. She moved a little about 20 minutes ago. The nurse said she'll probably wake up in the next hour or so. Tamara checked the monitors, reviewed the latest vital signs on the computer. Everything looked good. Sophie's fever was already coming down as the antibiotics did their work. You should go home, get some rest, Christopher said. You've been here all night. So have you, Tamara pointed out. It's my daughter. And I promised her I'd be here when she woke up. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sophie stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. She made a small sound, not quite a moan but close. Sophie? Christopher leaned forward. Baby, can you hear me? Sophie's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing. She looked confused, disoriented. Her hand moved to her abdomen, where bandages covered her incision. You had surgery, Christopher explained gently. They fixed what was hurting you. You're going to be okay now. Sophie's eyes found Tamara. Recognition dawned, followed by relief. Her right hand lifted slightly, forming a wobbly sign. You came back, Tamara translated, signing as she spoke so Sophie could understand. Yes, I promised I would. How are you feeling? Sophie signed slowly, clearly drugged and tired. Hurts, but better. The medicine will help with the pain, Tamara assured her. You're very brave, Sophie. Sophie's eyes moved between Tamara and her father. She signed something longer, her movements careful. She's asking if you're going to stay, Christopher said, surprising both Sophie and Tamara. I know that sign. I've seen her use it before. Tamara smiled. I'm not your regular nurse, Sophie. I was just covering a shift. But I'll visit you every day until you go home, okay? I promise. Sophie's face fell slightly. Christopher saw his daughter's disappointment and felt something shift in his chest. Actually, he said slowly, I have a different idea. Tamara, what if you didn't have to visit? What if you were Sophie's private nurse during her recovery? Tamara blinked. Private nurse. I'll pay you 3 times what you make at the hospital. You'd work with Sophie every day, help her recover, help us learn to communicate better. When she's well enough to come home, you could continue there, make sure she doesn't have any complications. What do you think? Tamara's mind raced. 3 times her hospital salary would be life-changing. She could save money, help her family even more, maybe start thinking about her own future instead of just surviving day to day. But more than that, she'd connected with Sophie. She saw herself in this little girl, struggling to be heard in a world that didn't know how to listen. She wanted to help her, wanted to make sure Sophie grew up confident and strong, knowing her voice mattered even if it was silent. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll do it. Sophie's face lit up despite her pain and exhaustion. She signed something that made Tamara laugh. She says you're hired, Tamara translated. Smart girl, Christopher said, squeezing his daughter's hand gently. Takes after her mother. The mention of Sophie's mother was brief, but Tamara caught the grief that flashed across Christopher's face. This man had lost his wife and nearly lost his daughter. The weight of that must have been crushing. Over the next few days, as Sophie began to recover, Tamara became a constant presence. She officially resigned from her hospital position and her second job at the clinic. Margaret, Christopher's assistant, handled all the paperwork to make Tamara Sophie's private nurse. Tamara spent hours at Sophie's bedside, helping her walk short distances, checking her incision, administering medications. But more than that, she talked to Sophie. Really talked, in sign language that flowed naturally between them. She learned about Sophie's love of painting, her favorite subjects in school, her dreams of becoming an artist one day. She also learned about Sophie's loneliness. How hard it was to make friends when you couldn't talk the way other kids did. How isolated she sometimes felt, even with the best tablet and the fastest typing skills. You're not alone, Tamara signed to her one afternoon. There's a whole community of people who communicate through sign. Beautiful, brilliant, talented people. I'll introduce you to my brother. He's going to love you. Sophie's eyes widened. He's deaf. Yes. And he's the coolest person I know. A few days later, Tamara brought Terence to visit. He was tall and lanky at 17, with the same warm brown skin and bright smile as his sister. He signed animatedly, telling Sophie stories about school, about his friends, about the deaf community he was part of. Sophie was entranced. She'd never met another young person who signed like she did. Terence treated her like a peer, not a child to pity. He showed her shortcuts in signing, taught her slang signs, made her laugh with jokes that only worked in sign language. Christopher watched from the doorway, seeing his daughter more animated and happy than she'd been in months. Watching Tamara interact with both kids, translating when needed, laughing at jokes she had to explain to Christopher afterward. He felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. A warmth, a pull, a sense of rightness. He pushed it down immediately. Tamara was Sophie's nurse. She was kind and caring because that was her job. He wouldn't complicate things by developing feelings that were probably just gratitude mixed with stress and exhaustion. But late at night, when he finally went home to shower and sleep in his own bed, he found himself thinking about Tamara's laugh, her patient smile, the way she looked at Sophie with genuine affection instead of professional concern. Stop it, he told himself. She saved your daughter's life. Don't be that man who mistakes gratitude for something else. But in the quiet of his empty house, he couldn't quite convince himself that's all it was. Sophie came home 2 weeks after her surgery. Christopher's house was a sprawling estate in Princeton, the kind of place that belonged in magazines. 12 bedrooms, an indoor pool, a library, a home theater, and art studio that Christopher had built specifically for Sophie. Tamara arrived early on Sophie's first morning home, let in by Mrs. Chin, the housekeeper who'd been with the Bennett family since Sophie was born. The older woman looked at Tamara with open curiosity but warmth. Mr. Bennett said you're the one who saved Sophie, Mrs. Chin said, leading Tamara through the enormous house. He said you're a miracle worker. Just a nurse who paid attention, Tamara replied, looking around at the luxury that surrounded her. This was so far from her small apartment in Newark that it felt like a different planet. Sophie's bedroom was on the second floor, painted soft lavender with white furniture and paintings covering every wall. Her own art, Tamara realized. Flowers and landscapes and abstract swirls of color that showed real talent. Sophie was awake, sitting up in her bed with pillows propped behind her. When she saw Tamara, she signed excitedly. "You're really here. At my house. This is so great." "I told you I'd be here every day," Tamara signed back. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Okay. A little sore. Dad made Mrs. Chen make me special breakfast. Pancakes shaped like hearts." Tamara smiled. "That sounds perfect. After breakfast, we'll go for a short walk around the house, okay? We need to keep building your strength." Over the next few weeks, Tamara fell into a routine. She arrived at the Bennett house each morning at 8, spent the day helping Sophie recover, teaching her new signs, encouraging her to paint and read, and gradually returned to her normal activities. In the afternoons, Christopher would join them, learning sign language alongside his daughter. He was a quick study, his business mind adapting to the visual language with surprising ease. Watching him practice with Sophie, making mistakes and laughing at himself, showed Tamara a different side of the intense millionaire she'd first met in the hospital. "I'm terrible at this," Christopher signed clumsily one afternoon, mixing up the signs for happy and angry. Sophie giggled silently, correcting him. Tamara felt her heart squeeze at the sight of them together, father and daughter reconnecting through this new shared language. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Christopher asked Tamara to stay for dinner. "Just to thank you for everything you've done," he explained. "Mrs. Chin is making too much food anyway." Tamara agreed, curious about this glimpse into his world. They ate in a dining room that could seat 20, at a table that probably cost more than her car. "This must be strange for you," Christopher said, noticing her discomfort. "All of this. It's beautiful," Tamara said honestly. "But yes, it's very different from what I'm used to." "Tell me about your world," he said. "What's your apartment like?" Tamara laughed. "I have a one-bedroom in Newark. My brother sleeps in the bedroom. I sleep on the couch. My mom lives 2 floors down with my aunt. It's cramped and noisy and the heat barely works in winter. But it's home." "That sounds hard." "It is sometimes. But we make it work. And now, thanks to you, it's going to get easier. I paid off my student loans last week. All of them. Do you know what that feels like? To not have that debt hanging over me anymore?" Christopher smiled. "I'm glad I could help." "You did more than help. You changed my life." Tamara paused, setting down her fork. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Sophie's mother. What happened to her?" Christopher was quiet for a moment. "Car accident. Sophie was 3. A drunk driver ran a red light. Isabella died at the scene." His voice was carefully neutral, but Tamara heard the grief beneath it. She was a painter like Sophie. She taught Sophie to love art before she could even talk. "I'm so sorry. It's been 7 years. You'd think it would hurt less by now, but..." He trailed off. "Having kids, it makes you vulnerable in ways you can't imagine until you have them. Everything that could hurt them, everything that could go wrong, it haunts you. And then when Sophie got sick, when I thought I was going to lose her too." "But you didn't," Tamara said gently. "She's here. She's healing. She's going to be fine. Because of you. Stop giving me all the credit. Sophie survived because she's strong. Because she never gave up trying to communicate. And because you loved her enough to demand answers instead of accepting that nothing could be done." They talked late into the evening, long past when Tamara should have gone home. She learned about Christopher's business, about how he'd built his company from scratch, about the pressure and responsibility of managing thousands of employees and billions in assets. He learned about her childhood, about becoming a caretaker for her brother at 12 years old when her father left, about putting herself through nursing school while working full-time. "You're remarkable," Christopher said finally. "You know that." Tamara felt her cheeks warm. "I just did what needed to be done. That's what makes you remarkable. Most people don't." When Tamara finally left that night, driving home in her old car through the quiet streets, she couldn't stop thinking about Christopher Bennett. Not the millionaire, not the desperate father in the hospital, but the man who'd shared dinner with her, who'd listened to her stories like they mattered, who looked at her like she was worth seeing. "Don't be stupid," she told herself. "He's grateful. He's being kind. That's all." But a small part of her, the part she tried to ignore, wondered if maybe it was something more. The next day, Margaret called Tamara directly. "Mr. Bennett asked me to set up some things for you. First, he'd like to provide you with a company car. Something reliable and safe for your commute." "That's not necessary," Tamara started, but remembered her promise to accept help with gratitude. Actually, thank you. My car is 15 years old and barely runs. A reliable vehicle would be wonderful. Perfect. Second, Mr. Bennett wants to set up a trust fund for your brother's education. Gallaudet University, you mentioned? Tamara's breath caught. Margaret, he already gave me money for Terrence's school. Consider this additional funds for graduate school if he chooses to pursue it. Mr. Bennett believes in investing in young people's futures. Tamara didn't know what to say. Christopher was doing so much, more than anyone had ever done for her family. Third, Margaret continued, Mr. Bennett would like to cover your mother's ongoing medical care. He's spoken with her doctors and she needs regular treatments and medications that her insurance doesn't fully cover. He'd like to eliminate any financial stress around her health. Now Tamara's eyes filled with tears. Why is he doing all this? Because you saved his daughter's life, Margaret said simply. And because Mr. Bennett believes in taking care of people who take care of the people he loves. After she hung up, Tamara sat in her car outside the Bennett house, crying. Not sad tears but overwhelmed tears. Grateful tears. Tears from someone who'd struggled her whole life, suddenly finding that struggle eased by someone's generosity. She went inside and found Sophie in the art studio, painting. Her movements were still careful because of her healing incision, but her face was alight with creativity. What are you making? Tamara signed. Sophie turned the canvas. It was a portrait of Tamara, rendered in bright colors and bold strokes. Not perfect but full of feeling. In the painting, Tamara's hands were forming signs and above her head, Sophie had painted words, "The one who heard me." Tamara couldn't speak. She just pulled Sophie into a gentle hug, mindful of her stitches, and held her close. "Thank you," she signed when she pulled back. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever made for me." "You're the most beautiful person I know," Sophie signed back. "Inside and out. And I love you." Tamara wiped her eyes. "I love you too, Sophie." It was true. Over these weeks, she'd fallen in love with this brave, creative, wonderful child. Sophie had become more than a patient. She'd become someone Tamara would do anything to protect and support. That evening, Christopher found Tamara in the library, reading medical journals about pediatric recovery protocols. "Working even after hours?" he teased. "Just making sure I'm giving Sophie the best care possible." Christopher sat down across from her. "Margaret told me she spoke with you today." "Yes." "Christopher, you don't have to do all that. You've already done so much." "I want to," he said firmly. "You gave me back my daughter. Let me give you peace of mind about your family. Please." Tamara looked at him, this man who'd entered her life so dramatically and was now changing everything about it. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you. For everything." "There's one more thing," Christopher said, looking suddenly nervous. "Sophie starts back at school next week, just half days at first. She won't need a full-time nurse once she's back in her regular routine." Tamara's heart sank. She'd known this was temporary, but she wasn't ready for it to end. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position," Christopher continued quickly. "Not as Sophie's nurse, but as her companion and communication specialist. Someone who can help her navigate school and social situations, who can advocate for her, who can make sure she's never again in a situation where no one understands her. The job would include full benefits, a salary of $200,000 a year, and you'd work from here from the house with flexible hours." Tamara stared at him. $200,000? "You'd also be helping me continue to learn sign language, and you'd serve as a liaison between Sophie and her school. It's a real job, not charity. I need someone I trust with my daughter, and you're the only person I trust completely." Tamara's mind spun. That salary would let her move her mother to a better place, help her aunt who'd been supporting her mom, give Terrence everything he needed. It would let her actually save money, plan for a future, maybe even buy a house someday. But more than that, it would let her stay in Sophie's life. That mattered more than she'd expected. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I accept." With gratitude. Christopher's smile was bright and genuine. "Thank goodness. Sophie made me promise not to let you leave." They talked about details, about schedules and responsibilities. But underneath the professional conversation, something else hummed. An awareness, a connection, a pull that neither of them acknowledged but both felt. When Tamara left that night in the new car Margaret had arranged for her, a sleek blue sedan that drove like a dream, she called Terrence. "Big brother," she said when he picked up, "things are about to change. Really change." "Good change?" he signed into the video call. "The best change. Get ready for Gallaudet because you're going. Full ride, no loans, no worries." Terrence's face lit up. Are you serious? Completely serious. The man whose daughter I helped, he's making sure you can go to any school you want. And Mom's medical bills are covered. And I have a new job that pays more than I ever imagined. Tamara, that's incredible. You deserve this. You've worked so hard for so long. We've worked hard, she corrected. But yeah, maybe we deserve some good luck finally. After she hung up, Tamara pulled over to the side of the road and cried again. Happy tears this time, pure and simple. For the first time in her life, she wasn't drowning in stress and bills and impossible choices. She could breathe. She could dream. She could imagine a future that wasn't just survival. And at the center of that future, whether she wanted to admit it or not, was Christopher Bennett and his daughter who'd changed everything by needing to be heard. The next few months passed in a warm blur. Sophie returned to school stronger and healthier than ever. Tamara went with her on those first difficult half days, sitting in the back of classrooms, helping Sophie communicate with teachers who didn't know sign language, making sure she felt supported and safe. Preston Academy, impressed by Sophie's story and Christopher's generous donation, hired a sign language interpreter to be available throughout the school day. But Sophie still preferred when Tamara was there, and Tamara found she loved being part of Sophie's educational journey. She watched Sophie bloom. The girl who'd been isolated and lonely began making friends, other kids learning basic signs to communicate with her. Sophie taught an after-school class in sign language that became so popular they had to move it to a larger room. She joined the art club, started painting murals around the school, became known not as the mute girl but as the talented artist who happened to communicate differently. Christopher watched his daughter transform and knew exactly who to thank. Tamara had given Sophie more than medical care. She'd given her confidence, community, and a sense that being different wasn't something to hide but something to celebrate. He found himself looking for excuses to be around Tamara, asking her opinion on business decisions that had nothing to do with Sophie, inviting her to stay for dinner more and more often, buying extra concert tickets and mentioning casually that they'd go to waste if she didn't want to go. Tamara noticed but didn't comment. She was hyper-aware of Christopher in ways that had nothing to do with work. The way he focused completely when someone spoke to him. The way he played piano late at night when he thought everyone was asleep. The way he looked at Sophie with such fierce love it made Tamara's chest ache. One Saturday, Christopher invited Tamara and her family to the house for a barbecue. He'd mentioned it casually, but Tamara knew it was significant. He was bringing together the two most important parts of his life, Sophie and the woman who'd saved her. Terence arrived first, bursting with excited energy. Christopher had set up the pool area with grills and tables, and he greeted Terence like an old friend. I heard you got accepted to Gallaudet, Christopher said, signing along with his words. Terence's smile could have lit the whole house. Early admission. I start in the fall. That's wonderful. What are you studying? Computer science. I want to develop technology that makes the world more accessible for deaf people. Christopher clapped him on the shoulder. The world needs people like you. Tamara's mother and aunt arrived next, driven by the car service Christopher had insisted on arranging. Tamara's mother, Patricia, was thin from her illness but smiling. Her aunt, Denise, looked around at the Bennett estate with wide eyes. Tamara didn't mention your house was a castle, Denise whispered. Christopher overheard and laughed. It's too big, honestly. Feels empty most of the time. Patricia took Christopher's hand in both of hers. Thank you for everything you've done for my daughter and my son. For our family. We'll never be able to repay you. You already have, Christopher said sincerely. Tamara gave me back my daughter. Nothing in the world is worth more than that. Sophie took charge of entertaining Terence, showing him her art studio, her room, every corner of the house and grounds. Watching them together, signing rapidly and laughing, Tamara felt overwhelming gratitude that Sophie had someone her own age who understood her so completely. The adults settled in the outdoor dining area. Mrs. Chen had prepared enough food for 20 people, insisting that you couldn't have a proper barbecue without options. As they ate, Patricia told stories about Tamara as a child, about how even at 8 years old she'd been taking care of everyone around her. She used to pack my lunch for school, Terence signed, which Tamara translated. She'd wake up extra early to make sure I had something good to eat. She's been my guardian angel since I was born. And mine, Sophie added from across the table. Stop, you're all going to make me cry, Tamara protested, but she was smiling. Christopher watched Tamara with her family, seeing the easy love between them, the way they supported and teased each other in equal measure. It was so different from his own childhood, raised by emotionally distant parents who saw him as an heir to their fortune rather than a child to love. He tried to be different with Sophie, had poured all his affection into her. But he'd still been a single father, often overwhelmed, often unsure if he was doing enough. Watching Tamara's family, he realized what had been missing. This warmth, this casual intimacy, this sense that you could be completely yourself because you were completely loved. Later, after dinner, Tamara found Christopher alone on the patio, looking out at the pool where Sophie and Terence were swimming. "They're good together," Christopher said. "I've never seen Sophie so comfortable with someone her own age." Terence needed someone to mentor too. He's been the youngest in his friend group for so long. It's good for him to be the older sibling for once. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Christopher said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever think about having kids of your own someday?" Tamara was surprised by the question. "I've been raising Terence since I was 12. In a lot of ways, I feel like I've already been a parent. But yes, someday if I found the right person, I'd love to have children." "What would the right person look like?" Tamara glanced at him, wondering where this was going. "Someone kind. Someone who puts family first. Someone who doesn't just say they value things but actually lives those values." She paused. "What about you? Do you ever think about getting married again?" Christopher's jaw tightened. "I never thought I would. After Isabella died, I couldn't imagine letting anyone else into our lives. Sophie and I, we were our own complete unit. But lately..." He trailed off. "Lately?" Tamara prompted, her heart beating faster. "Lately I've realized that maybe being a complete unit of two has made us isolated. Sophie needs more people in her life. Different perspectives, different kinds of love." He turned to look at Tamara. "You've shown me that." Tamara met his gaze, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. But before either of them could say more, Sophie and Terence called them over to watch their underwater handstands. The moment passed, but the awareness remained. As the evening wound down and Tamara prepared to leave with her family, Christopher walked her to the car. "Thank you for today," he said. "Your family is wonderful. Thank you for including them. This meant a lot to my mom especially. She's been worried about me working so hard for so long. Seeing me happy, seeing me settled, that gives her peace." "Are you happy?" Christopher asked. "Working here, being with Sophie, is this what you want?" Tamara looked up at him, at this man who'd become so much more than an employer over these months. "Yes," she said softly. "This is exactly what I want." Christopher smiled, and Tamara saw something in that smile that made her wonder if maybe, possibly, he felt the same pull she did. She drove home that night thinking about the way Christopher looked at her, the way he found excuses to be near her, the way Sophie had started calling her "my Tamara," like she was part of the family. Be careful, she warned herself. Don't mistake closeness for something romantic. He's your boss. Sophie's father. This is a job, not a relationship. But late at night, lying on her couch in her apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about Christopher's question. "Are you happy?" Yes, she was happy. Happier than she'd been in years. And a dangerous part of that happiness was tied up in feelings she probably shouldn't have for her employer. At the Bennett house, Christopher couldn't sleep. He paced his bedroom, thinking about Tamara's smile, her laugh, the way she fit so perfectly into his and Sophie's life. He was falling for her. Maybe had already fallen. And he had no idea what to do about it. Sophie solved the problem for him a week later. Christopher was working in his home office when she appeared in the doorway, looking determined. "We need to talk," she signed. "About what?" "About Tamara." Christopher's heart skipped. "What about her? Do you love her?" Christopher stared at his daughter. "Sophie." "Because she loves you," Sophie continued, her signs emphatic. "I can tell. And you look at her the way you look at pictures of Mom. Like she's precious. Like she matters." "Sophie, it's complicated." "What? You're both single. You both love me. You make each other smile. What's complicated?" Christopher sat back, realizing his 10-year-old daughter had cut through all his overthinking to the simple truth. He did love Tamara. And life was too short, too uncertain, to waste time being careful about feelings that felt this right. "You're very wise," he signed to Sophie. "I know," she signed back. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to talk to her. Really talk to her." "Good. Because if you don't, I will. She needs to know we want her to stay forever." Christopher pulled his daughter into a hug. "When did you get so grown up?" "I almost died, Dad." "It changes your perspective." She was right. It had changed everything. And maybe it was time to stop being afraid of being happy again. Christopher planned carefully. He wasn't a man who did anything halfway, and confessing his feelings to Tamara was too important to leave to chance. He started small. He began scheduling time for just the two of them, separate from Sophie. Lunch meetings to discuss Sophie's progress that turned into long conversations about everything else. Evening walks through his gardens after Sophie was asleep, talking under the stars about their dreams and fears and hopes. Tamara noticed the shift but didn't name it. She told herself they were becoming better friends, that the warmth between them was natural for two people who spent so much time together. But she couldn't ignore the way her heart raced when Christopher smiled at her. The way she found herself dressing more carefully on days she knew she'd see him. The way she looked forward to their evening talks more than anything else in her day. One Friday evening, Christopher asked Tamara to stay late. Sophie was spending the night at a friend's house, a rare occurrence that Sophie had been excited about for weeks. "I have something I want to show you," Christopher said after dinner. He led Tamara through the house to a room she'd never entered before. It was his late wife's studio, untouched since her death 7 years ago. "No one's been in here except me," Christopher explained, opening the door. "Not even Sophie, though she's asked." The room was filled with paintings. Stunning landscapes, vivid portraits, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with emotion. Isabella Bennett had been extraordinarily talented. "They're beautiful," Tamara breathed. She was beautiful, inside and out. Loving her was easy. Christopher moved to a particular painting, a portrait of Sophie as a toddler. "When she died, I locked this room in my heart. I told myself I'd focus on Sophie, on work, on surviving. I didn't think I'd ever want to let anyone else in." Tamara's pulse quickened. She understood where this was going, and part of her wanted to stop him, to protect them both from the risk of changing what they had. But another part, the part that had been falling for him for months, stayed quiet. "But then you walked into that hospital room," Christopher continued, turning to face her. "And you saw Sophie when no one else did. You heard her silence. And slowly, without me even realizing it, you became essential. Not just to Sophie but to me." "Christopher." Tamara started, but he gently touched her hand. "Please let me finish. I know this is complicated. You work for me. You're Sophie's companion. There are professional boundaries I'm about to cross. But I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just gratitude or friendship. It's more than that. It's been more for a while now." Tamara's eyes filled with tears. "I feel it too. I've been trying to be professional, but I feel it too." Christopher stepped closer. "Then why are we fighting it? Life is fragile. I almost lost Sophie. I've already lost one person I loved. I don't want to waste time being afraid when I could be choosing happiness. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it ruins everything? What if we don't try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what if?" Tamara laughed shakily. "You're very persuasive. Is this how you negotiate business deals?" "This isn't a deal. This is me telling you that I love you, Tamara Johnson. I love your strength and your kindness. I love how you see people really see them. I love watching you with Sophie, the way you've given her a voice and confidence. I love that you accepted my help with gratitude instead of pride. I love your family, your values, your laugh. I love all of you, and I don't want to hide it anymore." Tamara looked at this man, this beautiful, complicated, generous man who'd changed her life in every possible way. She thought about every reason this was risky. And then she thought about Sophie's words from weeks ago, "You're the most beautiful person I know." She'd been trying to give Sophie confidence to be herself. Maybe it was time to take her own advice. "I love you too," she said quietly. "I've been falling for you for months, trying to convince myself it was just circumstances or proximity. But it's not. The way you love Sophie. The way you listen when people talk. The way you tried to learn sign language even though it was hard because it mattered to your daughter. The way you helped my family without making us feel small. I love you, Christopher." Christopher cupped her face gently. "Can I kiss you? Please." The kiss was soft, tentative, full of possibility. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So what now?" Tamara asked. "Now we figure this out together. We take it slow. We make sure Sophie's okay with this. Sophie told me 3 weeks ago that she wished you'd hurry up and ask me to be her new mom," Tamara admitted. "She's more than okay with this." Christopher laughed. "That sounds like Sophie." His expression turned serious again. "I don't want you to feel pressured because of your job. If you want to keep things completely professional, I'll respect that. I'll find Sophie a different companion. Make sure you're not in a position where you feel obligated to." "Stop," Tamara interrupted. "I don't want different. I want this. I want you and Sophie and this life we're building together. Yes, it's fast. Yes, it's complicated. But I'm choosing it anyway because you're worth it." They talked late into the night, sitting in Isabella's studio, surrounded by her art. Christopher told Tamara about his marriage, about the love he and Isabella had shared, about his grief. "I'll never stop loving her," he said. "She's Sophie's mother. She'll always be part of our family." "I don't want you to stop loving her," Tamara replied. "She gave you Sophie. She made you the man you are. I'm not trying to replace her or erase her. I'm just hoping there's room in your heart for something new alongside what you had." "There is," Christopher assured her. "There's so much room. My heart's been closed for 7 years and you've opened it again." They made plans carefully. They would date properly, give Sophie time to adjust to the change in their relationship, keep things private until they were sure this was permanent. No rushing, no pressure, just two people exploring what they could be together. But plans changed faster than they expected. 2 days later, Christopher received a call that his company was facing a major crisis. A key overseas deal was collapsing, threatening hundreds of jobs. He'd need to fly to Tokyo immediately, be gone for at least 2 weeks. "Take Sophie with you," Tamara suggested when he told her. "She's healthy enough to travel and she'd love to see Japan." "Would you come too?" Christopher asked. "I know it's asking a lot, but I don't want to be away from you for 2 weeks when we just started this. And Sophie would feel more comfortable with you there." Tamara thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. "Yes. Absolutely yes." They flew first class to Tokyo 3 days later. Sophie was beside herself with excitement, her first international trip. On the plane, while Sophie watched movies with her headphones on, Christopher and Tamara held hands under the blanket they shared. "Is this real?" Tamara whispered. "A few months ago I was working 2 jobs and drowning in debt. Now I'm flying to Tokyo first class with a man I love." "It's real," Christopher promised. "And it's just the beginning." In Tokyo, while Christopher spent long days in meetings, Tamara and Sophie explored the city. They visited temples and museums, ate incredible food, took a million pictures. Sophie kept a journal in sign language, describing everything she saw and felt. One afternoon they found a school for deaf children and stopped to watch the kids playing. Sophie signed to some of them, and despite the language barrier they found ways to communicate. Sophie came away glowing. "There are kids like me everywhere," she signed to Tamara. "I'm not alone." "No, baby," Tamara signed back. "You're never alone." In the evenings, after Sophie was asleep, Christopher and Tamara would sit on the balcony of their hotel suite, looking out at the Tokyo skyline. "I'm going to ask you something," Christopher said one night. "And I want you to really think about it before you answer." "Okay. Move in with us. Officially. Not as Sophie's companion but as my partner. Bring your mother if you want, we have plenty of space. Bring Terrence on weekends and holidays. Make the house a home instead of just a place I keep Sophie safe." Tamara's breath caught. "Christopher, that's huge." "I know. And I know it's fast. But when something's right, why wait? You've already changed our lives. Make it permanent." Tamara thought about her cramped apartment, about her mother struggling in a place that wasn't good for her health, about Terrence commuting hours to visit. She thought about the Bennett house, spacious and beautiful but empty of the warmth that made a place home. "What about my independence?" she asked carefully. "I don't want to be someone you take care of. I want to contribute, to matter in my own right." "You already matter. You're not a dependent, you're a partner. Keep your job with Sophie, or quit and do something else entirely. I don't care. I just want you there building a life with us. And if it doesn't work? If 6 months from now we realize we made a mistake, then we figure it out like adults. But Tamara, I've made a lot of bets in my life. I've risked millions on deals that could have failed. This doesn't feel like a risk. This feels like the surest thing I've ever done." Tamara looked at this man who'd shown her nothing but generosity and respect, who loved his daughter fiercely, who saw her as an equal despite their different backgrounds. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll move in. My mother will be thrilled to have a space where she can breathe and heal properly. And Terrence will love having somewhere quiet to study before college." Christopher pulled her close. "You've made me so happy. You've made me happy too. Happier than I ever thought I could be." They kissed under the Tokyo stars, two people from different worlds building something new together. When they told Sophie the next morning, she literally jumped up and down with excitement. "You're really staying forever?" she signed. "Really," Tamara confirmed. Sophie threw her arms around Tamara. "Best day ever. Better than Disney World. Better than Christmas." Christopher watched his daughter and the woman he loved embrace, and felt pieces of his life clicking into place. His family was growing, evolving, becoming something beautiful and whole. The business crisis in Tokyo resolved better than expected. Christopher's calm negotiation and willingness to compromise won over his overseas partners. They flew home victorious, a family in every way that mattered. Moving Tamara and her family into the Bennett house took only a week. Patricia moved into a ground-floor suite with its own bathroom and sitting area, perfect for her mobility needs. Terrence got a room twice the size of the bedroom he'd been living in, with space for all his computer equipment. Tamara's things moved into Christopher's room after she and Sophie had a long conversation about it. "Are you okay with me sleeping in your dad's room?" Tamara asked carefully. Sophie rolled her eyes like only a 10-year-old could. "You're together. That's what together people do. I'm not a baby." "No, you're definitely not a baby," Tamara agreed, hugging her. Mrs. Chen was delighted to have the house full of people. She cooked enormous meals, fussed over Patricia's health, taught Terrence how to make traditional Chinese dumplings. The Bennett house, empty and echoing for so long, filled with laughter and life. Tamara's aunt visited on weekends. Sophie's friends came over to paint in the studio. Terrence's deaf friends gathered to play video games and practice for college. One evening, about a month after Tamara officially moved in, Christopher found her in Sophie's room. They were curled up together on Sophie's bed, reading a book about famous deaf artists. He watched from the doorway, his heart full. This was what he'd been missing. This warmth, this connection, this sense that his house was finally a home. What would you do if you finally found the family you'd been missing? Drop a comment below and subscribe to see how this beautiful story continues to grow. Tamara looked up and saw him watching. She smiled, and in that smile, Christopher saw his future. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and warm and worth everything. He'd almost lost Sophie, had almost lost his chance at this happiness. But grace, luck, fate, whatever you wanted to call it, had sent Tamara Johnson to them at exactly the right moment. And now she was theirs, and they were hers, and that was the greatest gift Christopher Bennett had ever received. Fall arrived in Princeton with brilliant colors and crisp air. Sophie returned to school full-time, thriving in ways she never had before. Terrence prepared for his departure to Gallaudet, excited and nervous in equal measure. Patricia's health improved dramatically with better medical care and less stress. And Tamara and Christopher grew deeper in love with each passing day. But not everything was perfect. Christopher's business world didn't always understand his relationship with Tamara. At a company dinner, one of the board members made a comment about Christopher's live-in help that made Tamara's stomach turn. Christopher corrected him immediately, introducing Tamara as his partner, but the damage was done. "They think I'm with you for your money," Tamara said later that night, sitting on their bedroom balcony. "Who cares what they think?" Christopher replied, though his jaw was tight with anger. "I care. I don't want people to look at us and see a rich man and the woman he's keeping. I worked hard my whole life. I earned my nursing degree. I saved Sophie's life through skill and compassion, not luck. But all they see is a black woman who landed a millionaire." Christopher took her hand. "Then they're blind. Anyone who knows you, really knows you, sees how brilliant and capable you are. But your business associates don't know me. They just see surface details and make assumptions. So let's change that. Come to the next board meeting. Present your ideas for the charitable foundation I'm setting up for deaf and mute children. Show them who you really are." Tamara looked at him doubtfully. "Me present to your board of directors? Why not? You're smart, articulate, and you know more about accessibility and communication challenges than anyone in that room. If I'm putting company resources behind this foundation, you should help shape its direction." The idea terrified and excited Tamara in equal measure. But she agreed, and spent the next 2 weeks preparing a presentation that would make those board members see her as more than Christopher's girlfriend. The day of the meeting, she wore a maroon suit that made her feel professional and confident. She'd practiced her presentation 100 times with Sophie and Terrence offering feedback. Christopher had offered to help, but she'd refused, needing to do this on her own merit. The boardroom was intimidating, full of powerful people who'd been running companies since before Tamara was born. But she thought of Sophie, struggling to be heard, and found her courage. Her presentation was excellent. She outlined the barriers deaf and mute children faced in education and healthcare. She proposed programs that would train teachers and medical professionals in basic sign language. She suggested funding for communication devices and technologies. She spoke about creating support networks for families who felt isolated and overwhelmed. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then one of the older board members, a woman named Patricia Sterling, started clapping. Others joined in. "That was remarkable," Patricia said. "Ms. Johnson, you've given us a clear, actionable plan that could genuinely change lives. I move that we approve the full funding request. The board voted unanimously in favor. After the meeting, several members approached Tamara to tell her how impressed they were. The man who'd made the dismissive comment weeks earlier apologized awkwardly. Christopher watched it all with pride that threatened to burst from his chest. This woman, this brilliant, strong, amazing woman, was his. And she was showing everyone exactly who she was. That night, they celebrated with Sophie and Tamara's family. Mrs. Chen made a special dinner. Even Terrence took a break from his college preparation to video call and congratulate his sister. "You're changing the world," he signed to her. "You're making it better for people like Sophie and me. I'm so proud of you." Tamara cried happy tears. For so long she'd been the one taking care of everyone else. It felt strange and wonderful to be celebrated, to have people proud of her accomplishments. Later, alone with Christopher, she said, "Thank you for pushing me to do that. I needed to prove to myself that I could hold my own in your world." "You don't just hold your own," Christopher replied. "You shine. You make everything better just by being in it." "I love you," Tamara said, not for the first time but still with wonder that this was her life. "I love you too. More every day." But the board meeting wasn't their only challenge. Sophie's school asked Tamara to speak to the other parents about communication strategies. Some parents were supportive, eager to learn how to better interact with Sophie and the other deaf and mute students. But others were resistant, saying it wasn't their responsibility to accommodate special needs kids. Tamara handled it with grace she didn't entirely feel. She explained that learning to communicate with all children made everyone's experience richer. That teaching kids empathy and inclusiveness was just as important as teaching them math and reading. Most parents came around. A few didn't. Sophie faced some bullying from kids whose parents had made their feelings clear at home. She came home one day signing that a classmate had made fun of her for not being able to talk like normal people. Tamara's heart broke. She wanted to march into that school and shake some sense into those parents. But instead, she sat with Sophie and helped her process her feelings. "Some people are scared of different," Tamara signed. "They don't understand that different doesn't mean less. It just means different." "But why do I have to be the one who's different?" Sophie signed, tears streaming down her face. "Why can't I just talk like everyone else?" Tamara gathered Sophie into her arms. "Because you're you. And you are perfect exactly as you are. The people who matter see that. The ones who don't, they're missing out on knowing an amazing person." Christopher found them like that and joined the hug. Together, they held Sophie until she felt better. "We're going to talk to the school," Christopher said firmly. "This kind of bullying isn't acceptable." They did talk to the school. The principal apologized and implemented stronger anti-bullying policies. The parents of the child who'd been cruel were called in for a conference. Things improved, though not perfectly. Through it all, Tamara marveled at Sophie's resilience. The little girl who'd almost died just months ago was now navigating social challenges with courage and grace. She kept painting, kept signing, kept being authentically herself. One Saturday, Sophie asked if they could invite her deaf friends from school over for a party. Tamara and Christopher agreed immediately. They set up the art studio for painting, prepared Sophie's favorite foods, and let the kids just be kids. Watching Sophie interact with peers who understood her completely, who communicated naturally in signs, Christopher felt emotional. This was what Sophie had needed all along. Community. Understanding. The sense that she belonged. "You did this," he said to Tamara, squeezing her hand. "You gave her this." "We did it together," Tamara corrected. "You were the one willing to learn, willing to change how your whole household operates to make Sophie feel heard." As the party wound down and parents came to collect their children, Christopher overheard one mother say to Tamara, "Thank you for organizing this. My son has been so happy lately, having Sophie as a friend. He's been asking when he can come back." Tamara smiled. "Anytime. We want Sophie to have a house full of friends." After everyone left, Sophie was exhausted but glowing. "Best day ever," she signed. "Thank you for letting me have my friends over." "Your friends are always welcome," Christopher assured her. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Tamara and Christopher sat in their room, talking about the day. "I want to do more," Christopher said. "The foundation is great, but I want to do something specifically for Sophie. Something that ensures she always has community and support." "Like what?" "I'm thinking about funding a summer camp for deaf and mute kids. Somewhere they can go and just be themselves, learn skills, make friends, not have to explain or adjust for the hearing world." Tamara's eyes lit up. "Christopher, that's brilliant. Terrence went to a camp like that when he was younger. It changed his life." "Then let's do it." We'll find land, build facilities, hire counselors who sign fluently. Make it world-class. Make it free for families who can't afford it. They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. Tamara contributed ideas from her experience with Terrence. Christopher brought his business expertise to make it financially sustainable. Together, they created something neither could have built alone. As Tamara fell asleep that night, wrapped in Christopher's arms, she thought about how far she'd come. From the exhausted nurse working double shifts to make rent, to a woman building programs that would help thousands of children. From someone invisible in most rooms to someone who commanded respect and attention. But more than any of that, she'd found love. Real, deep, supportive love that made her better and stronger. She'd found family not just with Christopher and Sophie, but with everyone in their expanding circle. She'd been so afraid to accept Christopher's help at first, worried about pride and independence. But she'd learned that accepting help with gratitude wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. And giving help with genuine care like Christopher did, was one of the most beautiful things a person could do. They were building something together. Not just a relationship, but a life that radiated outward, touching other lives, making the world a little bit better. And it had all started because one nurse had bothered to ask a sick child how she felt. The next morning brought a surprise. Christopher's sister Rachel called. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Christopher and Rachel had a complicated relationship. She disapproved of how quickly he'd moved on after Isabella's death, how he'd thrown himself into work and shut everyone out. "I heard you're dating someone," Rachel said, her tone hard to read. "Someone you hired to take care of Sophie." Christopher tensed. "I'm in a relationship with someone who saved Sophie's life and who we both love." "Yes. I'd like to meet her. And see Sophie. It's been too long." Christopher was cautious but agreed. Rachel lived in California, but she planned to visit the next weekend. When Christopher told Tamara about his sister, he couldn't hide his concern. "Rachel can be judgmental. She's going to have opinions about us." "Then I'll change her mind," Tamara said with more confidence than she felt. "Family's important. I'm not going to be the reason you stay distant from your sister." Rachel arrived on Saturday afternoon, immaculately dressed and coolly polite. She hugged Sophie warmly but assessed Tamara with sharp eyes. Over dinner, Rachel asked pointed questions about how Tamara and Christopher met, about their relationship timeline, about Tamara's background. Christopher got increasingly defensive, but Tamara stayed calm, answering honestly. Finally, Rachel said, "My brother has been alone for a long time. Sophie's been without a mother figure. I want to make sure you understand how much responsibility that is." "I do understand," Tamara replied evenly. "I've been taking care of people my whole life. I know what commitment looks like." "But do you love them? Or do you love what Christopher can provide?" The question hung in the air. Christopher started to object angrily, but Tamara put her hand on his arm. "I fell in love with a man who learns sign language to communicate with his daughter," Tamara said quietly. "Who flies across the country to be at her bedside when she's sick. Who would give up everything he has if it meant keeping her safe. I fell in love with a little girl who never gave up trying to be heard, who teaches sign language to other kids so they can understand her, who paints the world as she sees it. The money's nice. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But I'd love them if Christopher worked construction and we lived in a one-bedroom apartment. Because who they are has nothing to do with what they have." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry. That was unfair of me. I've been worried about Christopher for years, and I let that worry make me suspicious instead of happy that he found someone." "I get it," Tamara said. "You love your brother. You want to protect him. I'd do the same for mine." Sophie, who'd been following the conversation through Christopher's whispered translations, suddenly signed emphatically. Christopher laughed and translated aloud, "Sophie says Aunt Rachel needs to stop being a worrywart and accept that Tamara is family now." Rachel smiled genuinely this time. "Sophie's right. I'm sorry, Tamara. Welcome to the family. Officially." The rest of Rachel's visit went smoothly. She and Tamara even developed a tentative friendship, bonding over embarrassing stories about Christopher as a kid. When Rachel left, she hugged Tamara and whispered, "Thank you for making my brother happy again. And for taking such good care of my niece." As October turned to November, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Christopher's business thrived. Tamara's foundation work expanded. Sophie continued to flourish at school. Patricia's health remained stable. Terrence prepared for his spring departure to college. They were, in every way that mattered, a family. But life, as Christopher had learned 7 years ago, could change in an instant. And change was coming faster than any of them expected. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. The Bennett house was decorated with fall colors, pumpkins lining the driveway, a massive feast being prepared by Mrs. Chen with help from Tamara's aunt. The guest list had grown significantly. Tamara's family, Christopher's sister Rachel flying in from California, some of Sophie's school friends and their parents, even a few of Christopher's business associates Tamara had connected with. Christopher stood in the kitchen, watching Tamara coordinate the cooking with natural leadership. She wore a green dress that complemented her skin, her hair pinned up with loose curls framing her face. She was laughing at something Mrs. Chen said, and Christopher felt his heart clench with love so intense it almost hurt. He knew what he wanted to do today. He'd been planning it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Thanksgiving, surrounded by family, seemed perfect. The ring was already in his pocket. As guests arrived, the house filled with noise and warmth. Sophie and her friends immediately disappeared to the art studio. Terrence held court in the game room, teaching Christopher's business associates about deaf culture with the confidence of someone who'd spent his life educating others. Patricia held Sophie's baby pictures, telling Rachel embarrassing stories about Tamara as a child. At dinner, the massive dining table barely fit everyone. Christopher stood to make a toast, his hand shaking slightly as he lifted his glass. "A year ago," he began, "I thought I had my life figured out. I had my daughter, my work, and I told myself that was enough. But I was wrong. I was living, but I wasn't living fully. I was getting through each day instead of celebrating it." Sophie watched her father intently. She knew something was happening. "Then Sophie got sick," Christopher continued, his voice catching. "And in that hospital room, watching her suffer while no one understood her, I learned what powerlessness really felt like. All my money, all my resources, all my determination couldn't save her. I was losing my daughter, and there was nothing I could do." Tamara's eyes filled with tears, knowing where this was going. But then a nurse walked in. Someone who bothered to ask the right questions. Someone who saw Sophie as a person instead of a problem. Someone who gave her a voice when everyone else had written her off as unsolvable. Christopher turned to Tamara. "You saved my daughter's life. But more than that, you saved mine. You reminded me what it means to really live, to hope, to love again." He moved around the table until he stood beside Tamara's chair. Then, to gasps from around the table, he knelt down on one knee. "Tamara Johnson," he said, pulling out a ring box, "you've already made me happier than I ever thought I could be again. You've given Sophie the mother she deserves. You've turned this house into a home. You've taught us both what it means to be heard and to listen. Will you marry me? Will you make this family permanent?" Tamara couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at this man who'd changed her world, who'd seen her value when society told them they came from different places. She looked at Sophie, who was signing frantically, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." "Yes," Tamara finally managed. "Yes, of course, yes." Christopher slipped the ring on her finger, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by diamonds, blue like the scrubs she'd been wearing the night they met. Then he stood and kissed her while their family and friends erupted in applause and cheers. Sophie ran to them, throwing her arms around both. "You're really going to be my mom?" she signed. "Really," Tamara confirmed, signing through her tears. "Forever." The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and celebrations. Tamara's mother cried happy tears. Patricia hugged her future son-in-law. Terrence shook Christopher's hand formally before pulling him into a brother hug. "You better treat my sister right," Terrence signed. "Always," Christopher promised. Rachel pulled Tamara aside. "I'm so happy for you. And I'm sorry I doubted this at first. Watching you two together, watching how Sophie lights up around you, I see that this is real." "It is," Tamara assured her. "More real than anything I've ever felt." Later that night, after the guests had left and Sophie was finally asleep, Tamara and Christopher sat in their room, both still in shock at how perfect the day had been. "I can't believe I'm engaged," Tamara said, staring at her ring. "I can't believe this is my life." "Believe it," Christopher said, pulling her close. "Because this is just the beginning. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." They talked about the future. A spring wedding maybe in the gardens. Nothing too big, just family and close friends. Sophie as the flower girl, of course. Terrence walking Tamara down the aisle since Patricia wouldn't be strong enough. "I want to adopt Sophie," Tamara said suddenly. "Officially, legally. I want to be her mother on paper, not just in our hearts." Christopher's eyes shone with emotion. "She'd love that. I'd love that." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, two people who'd found their way to happiness through pain and chance and one miraculous night in a hospital. But the next morning brought unexpected news. Christopher received a call from his lawyer. There was a problem with one of his business deals, a major contract dispute that could cost the company millions. He needed to fly to Seattle immediately for emergency meetings. Go, Tamara said when he explained. I'll hold down the fort here. Come with me, Christopher urged. Both of you. But Sophie had school performances and art shows that week, things she didn't want to miss. Tamara decided to stay with her while Christopher handled the crisis. I'll be back in 3 days, Christopher promised, kissing them both goodbye. We'll plan the wedding then. He left that afternoon. The house felt emptier without him, but Tamara kept busy with Sophie's activities and her own foundation work. 2 days into Christopher's trip, Tamara received a call from Sophie's school. Sophie had gotten into an altercation with another student, something about a group project where the other kids excluded her. Tamara rushed to the school, prepared to advocate fiercely for Sophie. But what she found surprised her. Sophie wasn't upset about being excluded. She was upset because she'd signed angry words at the other students, words she'd learned from Terrence, words that were definitely not appropriate for school. I got mad, Sophie signed to Tamara, looking guilty. I said bad things. The principal was understanding. Sophie's usually such a well-behaved student. I think she was just frustrated. But we do need to talk about appropriate language. Tamara handled it with the right mix of understanding and firmness. She explained to Sophie that while her anger was valid, how she expressed it mattered. When people don't understand you, it's easy to get mad, Tamara signed. But signing mean things doesn't make them understand better. It just makes them think you're mean. We have to be better than their ignorance. Sophie nodded, chastened. I'm sorry. I know. Tomorrow you're going to apologize to those kids. And then you're going to ask your teacher to help them understand why excluding you from the project wasn't fair. Turn this into a teaching moment instead of a fight. Sophie did exactly that the next day. The kids she'd fought with apologized for leaving her out. The teacher had a conversation with the class about inclusiveness. Sophie's maturity in handling it impressed everyone. When Christopher called that night, Tamara told him what happened. How did you handle it so well? He asked. I would have stormed into that school and demanded. Which is why Sophie needed me to be the calm one this time, Tamara said gently. You protect her with your strength. I protect her by teaching her how to protect herself. Christopher fell even more in love with her in that moment. The business crisis in Seattle took longer to resolve than expected. Christopher was gone for over a week. He and Tamara talked every night, making plans for the wedding, discussing Sophie's progress, sharing their days. I miss you, Christopher said during one call. The house feels wrong when I'm not there with you too. We miss you too, Tamara replied. But we're okay. We're a team, remember? When Christopher finally came home, he found the house running smoothly. Tamara had managed everything from Sophie's school schedule to household issues to fielding calls from his office. She'd done it all without complaint, without asking for help, just handling what needed to be handled. You're amazing, he told her, pulling her into his arms. I mean it. You held everything together. That's what partners do, Tamara said simply. That weekend they started seriously planning the wedding. They chose a date in early April, giving them 4 months to prepare. Tamara wanted something elegant but not ostentatious. Christopher wanted whatever made her happy. Sophie threw herself into wedding planning with enthusiasm. She designed the invitations, painted decorations, practiced her flower girl walk daily. She referred to Tamara as Mom now more often than not, and each time it made Tamara's heart swell. Terrence came home for winter break and found his family transformed. His mother had her own beautiful suite instead of a cramped apartment. His sister was engaged to a millionaire who treated her like a queen. Sophie had become like a younger sister to him. You've done good, sis, he signed to Tamara one evening. You've built something real here. We built it together, Tamara corrected. All of us. This family isn't just me and Christopher and Sophie. It's all of us. Christmas morning was magical. The house was decorated like a winter wonderland. Gifts overflowed from under a massive tree. But the best gift was being together, all of them happy and healthy and home. Christopher gave Tamara a painting. It was a portrait of the three of them, Tamara, Christopher, and Sophie, their hands intertwined, done in Isabella's style. I had an artist recreate it using Isabella's techniques, Christopher explained. I wanted her style to be part of our family still. I hope that's okay. Tamara cried. It's perfect. It's like she's giving us her blessing. They hung it in the entrance hall where everyone who entered the house could see. This family built from tragedy and chance and love. As the new year began, wedding preparations intensified. Tamara worked with a wedding planner Margaret recommended, someone who understood that they wanted elegant simplicity. The gardens would be perfect for a spring ceremony. The guest list stayed small, just family and close friends. Sophie's adoption paperwork was filed. The process would take a few months, but by the time the wedding happened, Tamara would legally be Sophie's mother. "I'm going to change my name," Sophie announced one evening, "to Sophie Bennett Johnson. So I'm both of you." Tamara had to leave the room to cry happy tears. Everything was perfect. Almost too perfect. Tamara sometimes woke in the middle of the night, afraid that she'd wake up and find it all a dream. But Christopher would be there beside her, solid and real, and she'd remember. This was her life now. She'd gone from struggling to survive to building something beautiful. And she'd done it by accepting help when it was offered, by choosing love over fear, by believing that good things could happen to people like her. February brought Valentine's Day, and with it, a surprise from Sophie. She'd been working secretly with Mrs. Chen on a special dinner for Tamara and Christopher. She set the dining room herself, with candles and flowers she'd arranged, and a menu she'd designed with pictures. "You two need a date night," Sophie signed importantly. "Without me. I'll eat with Mrs. Chen and watch movies." Christopher and Tamara exchanged amused glances but agreed. They dressed up, came down to the dining room Sophie had transformed, and had a beautiful, intimate dinner. "Our daughter is very bossy," Christopher observed with a smile. "Our daughter is very sweet," Tamara corrected. "And she's right. We needed this." They talked about the wedding, about their honeymoon plans, about the future they were building. Christopher had officially made Tamara a partner in the foundation. Recognizing her contributions went far beyond advice. She was shaping policy, designing programs, making real change. "I'm proud of you," Christopher said. "Of everything you've accomplished." "I'm proud of us," Tamara replied. "Look what we've built together." As winter turned to spring, the wedding approached rapidly. Tamara's dress was ready, a simple but elegant white gown that made her feel like a princess. Sophie's flower girl dress matched perfectly. The gardens were preparing to bloom right on schedule. 3 weeks before the wedding, the adoption finalized. Tamara officially became Sophie's legal mother. They celebrated with a small family party, and Sophie cried happy tears when the judge declared her Sophie Bennett Johnson. "I have a mom again," she signed to Tamara. "A real mom who chose me. I'll always choose you," Tamara promised. "Every single day for the rest of my life." Everything was falling into place. The wedding was planned. The family was complete. The future looked bright and beautiful. But sometimes, life tests you right when you think everything is perfect. And that test was coming faster than any of them knew. The dinner party was Christopher's idea. 3 days before the wedding, he wanted to host their closest friends and family for a celebration meal. Margaret helped organize everything, and Mrs. Chen prepared an elaborate menu. The house gleamed, the gardens were perfect, and everyone who mattered most would be there. Tamara's mother arrived early, looking healthier than she had in years. Terrence came home from college, excited to walk his sister down the aisle in a few days. Rachel flew in from California. Christopher's business partners and their spouses, people who'd become genuine friends, filled the house with laughter. Sophie was in her element, wearing a blue dress she'd picked out herself, showing everyone her latest paintings, signing excitedly with Terrence about college life. The evening was perfect. The food was delicious, the conversation flowed easily, and Tamara felt surrounded by love. She looked around the table at all these people who'd become her family and felt overwhelming gratitude. They were finishing dessert when Sophie suddenly grabbed the edge of the table, her face going pale. Tamara noticed immediately. "Sophie? What's wrong?" Sophie tried to sign but her hands shook. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. Then her eyes rolled back and she slumped in her chair. "Sophie." Christopher was out of his seat instantly, catching his daughter before she fell. Tamara's nursing instincts kicked in immediately. She was beside Sophie in seconds, checking her pulse, her breathing, her color. "Call 911, she said sharply to Margaret, who was already reaching for her phone. Sophie's pulse was racing, her skin was hot and clammy. Tamara carefully laid her on the floor, elevating her legs. Christopher knelt beside them, his face white with terror. "What's happening?" he demanded. "Is it her appendix again?" "I don't think so," Tamara said, her mind racing through possibilities. Sophie's surgical scar was healed, no signs of infection. This was something else. Sophie's breathing became more labored. She was conscious but disoriented, her eyes unfocused. She tried to sign something but couldn't coordinate her hands. "Sophie, stay with me," Tamara said firmly. "I've got you." Just breathe. But Sophie's breathing was getting worse, not better. Tamara could hear the strain, see the struggle. Something was blocking her airway or affecting her lungs. The ambulance was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes that Sophie might not have. Tamara's mind raced through everything she knew, every medical scenario she'd encountered. Sophie's symptoms looked like anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction. But to what? They'd eaten this food before. Sophie had no known allergies. Then Tamara remembered something. Christopher, what did Sophie eat at school today? I don't know, I wasn't there, Christopher said, his voice breaking. Mrs. Chin, Tamara called. Did Sophie eat anything this afternoon when she got home? Anything new? Mrs. Chin hurried over, wringing her hands. She had cookies. Store-bought ones from a package a friend gave her at school. She said they were from a bake sale. Did they have nuts? Tamara demanded. I don't know, I didn't look at the package. Tamara made a split-second decision. Christopher, your home office, do you have a first aid kit? Yes, a full emergency medical kit. Why? Does it have an EpiPen? I think so. I bought it when Sophie was born just in case, but we've never needed it. Get it? Now. Christopher ran. Tamara stayed with Sophie, monitoring her breathing, keeping her calm. Sophie's lips were starting to turn blue. She was going into full anaphylactic shock. Every second counted. The ambulance was still 15 minutes away. Tamara had to act now or lose Sophie. Christopher returned with the emergency kit. Tamara tore it open, finding the EpiPen in its protective case. It was within its expiration date. Thank God. What are you doing? Rachel asked fearfully. Sophie's in anaphylactic shock. She's allergic to something she ate. If I don't give her epinephrine right now, she's going to stop breathing. Tamara had done this before, had administered EpiPens to patients. But never to someone she loved like a daughter. Never with stakes this high. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. She exposed Sophie's thigh, positioned the EpiPen and jabbed it firmly into the muscle, holding it for 10 seconds. Then she pulled it out and waited, counting seconds that felt like hours. Come on, Sophie, she whispered. Come on, baby. Stay with me. For 10 terrible seconds nothing happened. Then Sophie gasped a huge gulp of air. Her eyes focused slightly. Her breathing, while still labored, improved marginally. There you go, Tamara said, relief flooding through her. That's it. Keep breathing. You're going to be okay. But they weren't out of danger yet. The EpiPen bought them time, but Sophie needed to get to a hospital for monitoring and additional treatment. Anaphylaxis could have secondary reactions hours later. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. The paramedics praised Tamara's quick thinking and took over Sophie's care, loading her into the ambulance. I'm coming with her, both Tamara and Christopher said simultaneously. The paramedic nodded. Both of you, let's go. In the ambulance, Sophie's breathing continued to improve. She was conscious enough to sign weakly to Tamara. Scared. I know, baby. But you're okay now. I've got you. At the hospital, Sophie was immediately taken to the ER. Doctors confirmed Tamara's diagnosis. Severe anaphylactic reaction likely to tree nuts. They'd never tested Sophie for allergies because she'd never had a reaction before. Sometimes allergies develop suddenly, they explained. Sophie would need to carry her own EpiPen from now on. They'd do comprehensive allergy testing once she was stable. But thanks to Tamara's quick action, Sophie was going to be fine. Christopher held Tamara in the hospital hallway while Sophie was being observed. He was shaking, the terror of almost losing his daughter again washing over him. You saved her, he said, his voice breaking. Again. You saved her again. I just did what needed to be done, Tamara replied, though she was shaking too now that the crisis was over. You were so calm so fast. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known what to do. Christopher couldn't finish the sentence. But I was there, Tamara said firmly. And I did know what to do. That's what matters. The wedding guests had all gone home, the perfect evening shattered by crisis. But no one cared about the party. All that mattered was that Sophie was safe. By midnight, Sophie was stable and sleeping. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation, standard procedure after anaphylaxis. Christopher and Tamara took turns sitting with her, neither willing to leave her alone. In the quiet hospital room, with Sophie sleeping peacefully, Christopher looked at Tamara with such love and gratitude it took her breath away. I can't imagine my life without you, he said quietly. You've saved Sophie twice now. You've saved me. You've made us whole. You've saved me too, Tamara replied. You gave me a family, a purpose, a home. You showed me that accepting help doesn't make you weak. That love can change everything. Marry me in 3 days? Christopher asked, though they were already engaged. Tamara smiled. Try and stop me. Sophie stirred, her eyes opening. She saw them both there and signed weakly, You guys are being mushy. They laughed through their tears. Their daughter, their funny, brave, wonderful daughter, was going to be fine. The next morning, Sophie was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health and strict instructions about avoiding tree nuts. She had a prescription for her own EpiPen and an appointment for comprehensive allergy testing. At home, everyone gathered around to welcome Sophie back. Patricia hugged her granddaughter to be carefully. Terence signed elaborate stories to distract Sophie from the trauma of the night before. Rachel made Sophie's favorite hot chocolate. 3 days until the wedding, Sophie signed to Tamara. Nothing's going to stop it, right? Nothing, Tamara promised. Not even emergency room visits. The next few days passed in a blur of final wedding preparations mixed with extra caution about Sophie's new allergy diagnosis. Mrs. Chen went through every ingredient of every food in the house. They notified Sophie's school, her friends' parents, everyone who might offer her food. But through it all, the wedding planning continued. The dress was ready. The flowers were ordered. The ceremony was planned. The guests were confirmed. And in 2 days, Tamara Johnson would become Tamara Bennett, officially and forever. She'd gone from being a struggling nurse to saving a life to finding a family to building a future she'd never dared to dream of. And she'd done it by choosing love over fear, hope over cynicism, and gratitude over pride. The test had come as tests always do. And they'd passed it together as a family. Now, all that remained was to celebrate the love they'd built and the life they'd created. The wedding was going to be perfect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, April sunshine streaming through the windows of the Bennett house. Tamara woke early in the guest room where she'd spent her last night as an unmarried woman, per tradition. She could hear activity throughout the house. Mrs. Chin directing the caterers, florists arranging displays, Margaret coordinating the final details. Patricia came in carrying coffee, moving more easily than she had in years. My baby's getting married today, she said, sitting on the bed beside Tamara. I can't believe this is real, Tamara admitted. A year ago, I was working double shifts and wondering how I'd pay next month's rent. Now I'm marrying a man I love in a garden that looks like something from a fairy tale. You deserve this, Patricia said firmly. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. You deserve to be loved and celebrated. I just hope I'm enough, Tamara said quietly. Christopher's world is so big, so important. What if I can't be what he needs? Patricia took her daughter's hand. Baby, you saved his daughter's life. Twice. You've given Sophie confidence and a voice. You've made Christopher happy again after years of grief. You're not just enough. You're everything they need. Tamara hugged her mother, grateful for the wisdom and support. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For raising me to be strong, for showing me how to love even when things are hard. That's what mothers do, Patricia said. And now you're a mother too. To a wonderful little girl who adores you. Sophie burst into the room at that moment, already dressed in her flower girl dress, her hair styled perfectly. Is it time yet? She signed excitedly. Can we start? Not for 3 more hours, Tamara signed back, laughing. You're very early. I couldn't sleep. I'm too excited. You're marrying my dad today. You're officially becoming my mom. How could I sleep? Tamara pulled Sophie into a hug. I'm already your mom, baby. The wedding just makes it official for everyone else. The hours passed in a whirl of preparation. Rachel and Tamara's aunt helped her into her dress, a simple but elegant white gown with delicate beading. Terence came to check on her, handsome in his suit. You look beautiful, he signed. Dad would be proud. He meant their father, the man who'd left when Terence was born. Tamara felt a pang, wishing he could see what they'd become despite his absence. But then she thought of Christopher, who'd chosen to be a father every single day, and knew that biology mattered less than commitment. Christopher's going to be a great brother-in-law, she signed to Terence. He already loves you like family. I know, Terence replied. I'm happy for you, sis. Really happy. At exactly 3 o'clock, guests began arriving. The garden was transformed, with white chairs set up in rows, flowers everywhere, a beautiful arch where the ceremony would take place. The guest list was small but significant. Close friends, family, a few of Christopher's business associates who'd become genuine friends, some of Sophie's teachers, parents from her school who'd embraced inclusiveness. Tamara watched from an upstairs window as people arrived, as Christopher appeared looking nervous and handsome in his dark blue suit. Sophie took her place at the front, holding a basket of flower petals, practically vibrating with excitement. "Ready?" Margaret asked, appearing at Tamara's side. "So ready," Tamara replied. The music started. Tamara took Terence's arm and they walked down the grand staircase through the house and out into the garden. Every head turned to watch her approach. But Tamara only saw Christopher. The way his face lit up when he saw her. The tears that immediately started streaming down his cheeks. The love that radiated from him so powerfully she could feel it from across the garden. She walked down the aisle between the white chairs, past smiling faces, toward the man who'd changed her life. Terence placed her hand in Christopher's, then signed, "Take care of my sister." "Always," Christopher signed back. The ceremony was short but meaningful. The officiant spoke about love that develops from crisis, about families built from choice rather than obligation, about the power of really seeing another person. When it was time for vows, Christopher went first. "Tamara, the night we met, you saved my daughter's life by doing something simple but profound. You listened. You saw her as a person who needed to be heard, not a problem to be solved. Since then you've taught me to listen too. To really hear what people are saying even when they're silent. You've shown me that love isn't about grand gestures but about daily choices to be kind, patient, and present. You've made me a better father, a better man, a better person. I promise to spend the rest of my life listening to you, seeing you, loving you the way you deserve. I promise to be your partner in everything, to support your dreams, to celebrate your victories, and to stand beside you in challenges. I promise to love your family as my own, to honor the people who made you who you are. And I promise to never take for granted the gift of having you in my life." Tamara was crying before he finished. She took a breath, then said her own vows. "Christopher, when I walked into that hospital room, I was exhausted. I'd been working 2 jobs, struggling to keep my family afloat, wondering if I'd ever have anything more than survival. I didn't know that night would change everything. You've given me so much more than financial security. You've given me a home, a family, a purpose bigger than myself. You've shown me that accepting help isn't weakness but wisdom. That letting people love you doesn't make you dependent, it makes you connected. You've trusted me with your daughter, your heart, your life. I promise to be worthy of that trust. I promise to love Sophie as my own, to raise her with kindness and strength. I promise to be your partner in building the foundation, in creating programs that help other children like Sophie be heard. I promise to choose gratitude over pride, love over fear, hope over cynicism. And I promise to love you every day for the rest of our lives, through good times and challenges, through ordinary moments and extraordinary ones." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands engraved with each other's names and their wedding date. When the officiant pronounced them married, Christopher kissed Tamara with such joy that the guests erupted in applause and cheers. Sophie ran forward, throwing flower petals everywhere, signing, "Finally! You're married. We're a real family now." The reception was held right there in the garden, with tables set up under twinkling lights as the sun began to set. There were toasts and laughter, delicious food carefully nut-free for Sophie's safety, and dancing under the stars. Christopher's first dance with Tamara was to a song they'd chosen together, one that spoke about finding home in another person. They swayed together, wrapped in each other's arms as their family and friends watched with happy tears. "How do you feel, Mrs. Bennet?" Christopher whispered. "Like the luckiest woman alive," Tamara replied. "And it's Mrs. Bennet Johnson now, remember? How could I forget?" Sophie picked that name herself. After their dance, Christopher danced with Sophie while Tamara danced with Terence. Then the dance floor opened up and everyone joined in. Patricia sat with Rachel, watching the celebration with satisfaction. "Your brother found a good one," Patricia said. "My brother found the perfect one," Rachel corrected. "I was skeptical at first, I'll admit. But watching them together, watching how Tamara loves Sophie, how she's changed Christopher's whole life. She's exactly what they needed." As the evening wore on, speeches were made. Margaret talked about watching Christopher transform from a grieving widower into a happy man again. Rachel told stories about Christopher as a child, making everyone laugh. Terence spoke about his sister's strength and generosity, how she'd raised him and cared for their mother while building her own career. Then Sophie stood up. She was too young to make a formal speech, but she'd prepared something with Tamara's help. She signed and Tamara translated aloud. "When I got sick last year, I thought I was going to die. I tried so hard to tell the doctors what was wrong, but no one understood me. I felt invisible, like my voice didn't matter because I couldn't make sounds. Then Tamara came. She was the first person who really saw me, who knew I was trying to say something important. She saved my life. But more than that, she made me feel like I mattered. like being different wasn't bad, just different. She taught me sign language isn't just a way to communicate. It's a real language, beautiful and complete. She introduced me to other kids like me. She showed my dad how to really hear me. Tamara, you're the best mom I could ever ask for. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for loving us. I love you so much. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Tamara stood and hugged Sophie tightly, both of them crying happy tears. The party continued late into the evening. Christopher and Tamara didn't leave for their honeymoon until morning, wanting to spend this night celebrating with everyone they loved. They danced and laughed and soaked in the joy of being surrounded by family. Late that night, after the guest had gone home and Sophie was finally asleep, Christopher and Tamara stood together in the garden, looking at the stars. Can you believe this is our life? Tamara asked. Sometimes I still can't, Christopher admitted. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find it was all a dream. That you're not really here, that Sophie's still sick, that I'm still that lonely man who thought he'd never be happy again. But it's real, Tamara assured him. We're real. This family is real. And it's going to keep getting better. What's next? Christopher asked. We have the foundation, the family, the life we wanted. What's our next dream? Tamara thought about it. I want to write a book. About communication challenges in healthcare, about how medical professionals can better serve deaf and mute patients. About how one conversation can save a life. That's brilliant. What else? I want us to have a baby, Tamara said quietly. I know we have Sophie and she's perfect. But I'd love to give her a sibling, to experience pregnancy and infancy with you. Christopher's face lit up. Really? You want another child? I do. Is that okay? It's more than okay. It's perfect. Let's do it. Let's have a baby. They talked about the future, about expanding their family, about the work they do with the foundation, about watching Sophie grow up, about supporting Terrence through college, about caring for Patricia as she aged. They talked about opening that summer camp for deaf and mute children, about maybe starting a school, about all the ways they could use their resources and experience to help others. As the night grew late, they finally went inside, up to their room, ready to start their life as husband and wife. 6 months later, Tamara found out she was pregnant. Sophie was overjoyed at the prospect of being a big sister. She immediately started planning nursery decorations and making lists of baby names and sign language. The pregnancy was healthy and easy. Tamara continued her work with the foundation, now focused on building the summer camp they dreamed of. Christopher balanced running his company with being an involved husband and father, never letting work consume him the way it had before Tamara. Their son was born in early spring, a year and a half after that night in the hospital when Tamara had first saved Sophie's life. They named him Isaiah Christopher Bennett Johnson. He was born hearing, which meant Sophie would get to teach him sign language as he grew, becoming his translator and guide. Sophie fell in love with her baby brother immediately. She helped change diapers, sang to him in signs, painted pictures for his nursery. She'd grown into a confident, creative, happy child who knew her voice mattered even though it was silent. Terrence graduated from Gallaudet and got a job developing accessible technology, creating apps and devices that help deaf people navigate a hearing world. He visited often, bringing his girlfriend, a deaf artist he'd met at school. Patricia's health remained stable, allowing her to be a grandmother to both Sophie and Isaiah, something she'd never dared to hope for during her cancer treatment. The foundation grew, helping hundreds of children and families. The summer camp opened to overwhelming demand, providing a space where deaf and mute children could be themselves without explanation or adjustment. And through it all, Christopher and Tamara built a life based on the principles that had brought them together. Listening, really listening. Seeing people fully. Accepting help with gratitude. Offering help with respect. Choosing love over fear. Believing that kindness, hope, and compassion could change the world, one person at a time. 5 years after their wedding, on their anniversary, they returned to the hospital where they'd met. Tamara had been invited to speak to the nursing staff about patient communication. Christopher and Sophie came with her. As they walked through the familiar halls, past the room where Sophie had almost died, Christopher squeezed Tamara's hand. "This is where our story started," he said. "No," Tamara corrected. "This is where our story was saved. Our story started the moment you chose to learn sign language. The moment you decided that understanding your daughter mattered more than your pride or comfort. The moment you chose to change." "And you," Christopher replied. "You chose to see a child who needed to be heard instead of just another patient to manage. You chose to care." Sophie, now 15 and growing into a remarkable young woman, signed to them both, "You're being mushy again. But I love it. I love you both. Thank you for being the best parents ever." They hugged in that hospital hallway, a family built from crisis and choice, from listening and love. Tamara Johnson Bennett Johnson had started as a tired nurse wondering how she'd pay her bills. She'd become a mother, a wife, a founder of a charity that changed lives, an author whose book on medical communication became required reading in nursing schools, a woman who proved that accepting help didn't diminish you but could elevate you to become everything you were meant to be. Christopher Bennett had started as a lonely widower convinced he'd never love again. He'd become a husband who knew that love could happen twice in a lifetime, a father who understood that really hearing someone meant more than expensive treatments, a man who used his wealth to lift others up instead of just building bigger walls around himself. Anne Sophie Bennett Johnson, the little girl whose silence had almost cost her everything, became a voice for others who struggled to be heard. She grew up to be an artist and advocate, using her paintings and her story to show the world that different forms of communication were just as valid and beautiful as speech. Their story, which had started with crisis and desperation, became one of hope and triumph. Not because problems disappeared or life became easy, but because they chose to face everything together with love and listening and grace. Years later, when Sophie's children asked her about her childhood, she'd tell them about the night she almost died because no one could understand her. And then she'd tell them about the nurse who'd bothered to ask the right questions, who'd seen her as a person instead of a problem. Sometimes, Sophie would sign to her children, the greatest gift you can give someone is simply paying attention. Really seeing them. Really hearing them. That's what Tamara did for me. That's what she taught my dad to do. And that's what saved us all. And in a house that was always full of laughter and love, surrounded by family that had been chosen as much as born, Christopher and Tamara would sit on their porch, watching their children play, knowing that they'd built something extraordinary out of ordinary moments of kindness. They'd started as strangers in a hospital room. They'd become a family that proved love could heal anything, that hope was stronger than fear, and that sometimes the best things in life came from simply choosing to listen when someone needed to be heard. And they lived happily, not in a perfect world without problems, but in a real world made better by their choice to love kindly, listen carefully, and believe that every person, no matter how they communicated, deserved to be heard.